Hello, Stacy.
Hi, Marina.
It's very good to see you. I miss you. We did meet last week, and it feels um, that it's been a long time since our previous meeting. And so, how was your holiday?
It was lovely. It was so lovely for a non-traditional holiday. I felt like I connected with everyone in my life and felt the love and support from afar and virtually. And I don't know, we talked the other day about the connection, the virtual connection versus the in-person connection. And um, I don't know, it felt special. It felt different but special.
Very good. Very good.
How about your holiday?
Well, mine was low key. First of all, traditionally, we celebrate New Year's much with much more festivities than Christmas. So that is why it was just my husband and I, very quiet, very lovely. I went for a walk. We went for a walk together. He played pickleball. I went for a lawn walk. So it was very good in terms of relaxing. And I didn't see clients last week. So I took a week off. And I also felt very, very rested.
Amazing.
Yes. And another thing that kind of came to me last week, and this is something that we may talk about today, um, is that my daughter, she was in Florida for the holidays, and we had an interesting conversation when she came back. And as we talked a few minutes before we started recording, you said you also had an interesting conversation with your mom. So maybe we use this opportunity, and we actually wanted to record this for some time, of the nature of the relationship between mothers and their adult daughters. And since we belong to two different generations, my daughter and you and my daughter are the same age, and I'm probably close to your mom's age, but also we do not relate blood-wise. I believe we relate very closely as two souls, but not as relatives, and it changes the dynamic of the relationship. So, why don't we talk about that? What makes the relationship between mothers and adult daughters so tense often? Is it typical? It is typical. We probably all know it, but why is it so tense very often? And what can we do from both sides to prevent this tension? Would you like to talk about it?
Yes, with so many thoughts.
And what are the kind of the first thoughts that come to mind?
It is such it's an intense relationship, and it is filled with so much love and gratitude. And I am not a mom, hopefully yet.
Mhm.
So I don't have the experience of being a mom, but I can imagine that if and when I ever do, there'll be this immense gratitude and appreciation for the role a mother plays in your life. Um, but it's also filled with a ton of conflict and tension
Yes.
and um yeah, yes.
And I agree with you completely that on one hand, it's love, sometimes so much love that it's hard to put into words, but also a lot of fear. And I believe in the conflict, most likely from my perspective, based on two things: mother's fear of losing her daughter, or losing not only to death, but also losing the relationship, losing the image of the daughter that I believe every mother creates, losing the connection, losing common interests. So there are so many potential losses that a mother of adult losing when the daughter gets married and has her own significant others that mother may or may not relate to well. And these are certainly the factors that play a big role in the mother's daughter's relationship. And another thing that I believe, something that we already talked about, is the idea of identification.
Mhm.
Whether we'll like it or not, on some mostly unconscious level, as mothers, we identify with our daughters. And as daughters, we often identify with our mothers, which means, let me clarify what identification is. our self-image depends or is affected by of how our mother is, and for the or how our daughter is, who she is, it affects the image of a mother and vice versa. Self-concept, self-image. And yeah, go ahead.
Yes, and I think uh, allowing that image or um, identification to grow and to change and to evolve over the years, I think is important versus saying, this is my mom or this is my daughter and this is who you are in my life and from birth to however old, and not having the ability to change that role in each other's lives over the course of our lives. And I think that's what I think about a lot, and what I'm sitting with right now of like the role you play in each other's lives and allowing that to grow and change and be fluid versus stuck.
So beautifully said. And I agree completely. So changing, going with the flow of life, something that we've been talking, I think every time we meet, we talk about going with the flow of life and also following your heart. And everything else are the barriers or hindrances that stand in our ways. And in order to do it, it's so interesting that there are because we know when we think we know our mother, or mothers think they know their daughters, this is one of the greatest hindrances. So as you said many times, and even today before we started recording, you said, what if we start with uh, we were talking about our workshops, and what if we suggest that people um, address each other and engage into conversation with each other as if they just met, without any preconceived ideas, without any predicaments, start communicating anew. And if only we could do it with our daughters and our mothers, I think it would be a completely different world. And everybody else, but at least there in the family.
It's a great lens to try for anyone and everyone listening in. Can you greet your mother or your daughter with as a stranger and just be
Mhm.
curious about their lives and their hopes and dreams and fears and passions, and um, it opens up so many more outlets for growth and discovery and connection than bringing all of our past into every connection and relationship.
Yes. So we know, I think at least I know I don't like the word know here. We pinpointed this ideal, this idea of meeting your mom and your daughter, or fathers and sons, or friends, or whatever, whoever we are getting in contact with, as if we just met, asking questions, observing anew without preconceived ideas. So this is the number one thing that I think we need to contemplate in any relationship, but particularly the relationship within the family, when we think we know the person, right? And another thing, interestingly enough, when Katie came back from her vacation, she went to Florida during the Christmas holidays, and I asked how your vacation was, and we got into this conversation. And interestingly enough, we philosophized a little bit, and she said, the two things that I discovered that uh, either people are completely oblivious of their influence or how their words affect others, or they are aware but cannot change. So, cannot change in terms of nobody can change overnight. And oh my God, it touched me so deeply, because this is where I find myself all the time, stepping on the same raking fork over and over and over, or falling flat on your face. In my relationship with Katie, is that I think I'm pretty aware of what I'm doing when I'm trying to control her, or telling her what to do, or talking about my expectations. And as we already spoke many times, expectations are our killers. And nevertheless, we have them. So each time I'm aware of it, it's almost like this unconscious force within me that I still behave the way I did in the past, knowing that it will spoil the conversation, knowing that most likely it will not lead anywhere. Yet I keep exercising the same behaviors over and over. And these behaviors are trying to tell her what to do, certain expectations. And when she doesn't meet them, it's a disappointment, which she feels, I think, the first glance that she sheds on me, it's like, okay, I already know that my mom is disappointed with me. And thinking that I know better what's better for her. It's, I know about all these things and I keep doing it. It's such an amazing uh, question. I don't know, mystery.
I think this is exactly why I said allowing the roles that we play in each other's lives to be fluid and to grow and to evolve and to change, because I will speak for my mom and I. Like, I need my mom's love and support and friendship in my life. I don't need her to tell me what to do. And if I if I want her to tell me what to do, then I'll ask, right? Or
Mhm.
I will say, I need help. I
Yeah.
need to figure this out. And I think there's expectation. The word expectation came to my mind, and just listening to you and having this conversation of, there's expectations that we both hold to each other from when we were probably 5 or 3, when she was raising me and I actually like needed her for survival.
Mhm.
And now it's like grown to not survival, but just a friend and a support and a um this wise woman in my life that has been through twice as much as I have and has a different perspective in the world that we can share. And I think that's where the times where my mom and I have had the most fluid and free and um, strongest connection is when we both just let each other be, but know we're there for each other. And there, the expectations and the grip of like, you have to do this and you have to follow this are not there.
You just nailed it. And I believe you nailed it with the word survival.
Mm.
Because when I'm asking myself, why am I on autopilot, even being aware about everything I'm doing that will most likely not lead to a good outcome of the particular conversation? Why do I keep doing it? And I think the thing is survival, the core thing, because expectations, and this is something that I discovered not that long ago, that mothers need to allow their daughters and sons, but we're talking more specifically about mother-daughter relationship right now, not only to be who they are,
Yes.
but also, and it's very hard for me to pronounce it, but I will say it anyway, choose to live or not to live.
Mm.
And this is something for me when I realized it, that I allow my daughter to live, but I also allow her to die, God forbid. But then at least this awareness starts changing me in terms of stop being this protector factor. You nailed it when you said, yes, I needed my mom at 3 for me to survive. Now you don't need your mom to survive. But your mom is still, as and I am too, and most moms are, on this mode of protecting their daughters and sons
Mhm.
in terms of survival. So I hope this awareness that I discovered for myself not that long ago, that it's a survival thing, will help me continue to change my relationship with my daughter.
Yes. Yes. I have another thought in
Mm-hmm.
relation to that of, and I think this is all relationships, and we've talked about it with intimate relationships, friendships, all any kind of relationships. But I think having kids is this um the intention and the role that you have kids into your life as is important. That there I hold this expectation that I have to fill this role for my mom in her life,
Mm-hmm.
instead of just being in her life. There's this bucket that I need to fit in to complete her.
Hmm.
And it feels like a lot of pressure, and not necessarily so much in my life now, but in the past. And my mom and I have a beautiful relationship now, but we've had pushes and pulls and struggles along the way. But it's this pressure to be this person for my mom versus be who I want to be or will be in life. And um it's the same with like any relationship. If you have a relationship to fill something inside of you that's empty versus just to create in full capacity, it's different and it feels different.
Well, so well said. And if I understood you correctly, I just would like to clarify. So, what you are saying is that building a relationship not based on roles and certain expectations tailored to these roles, but as just another human being who, without any need for them to fill any empty space or to do anything whatsoever specifically, right? So just allowing uh, your daughter to be
Yeah.
without the necessity of her feeling some insecurities in me or some loneliness in me or some whatever it is. So being relating, we can say relating to your daughter as a soul to soul, not role to role. Is
Yeah,
that what you meant?
it's like creating life out of a complement to my life than a lack
Hmm.
of life. Yes.
Very beautifully said.
Yeah.
A compliment versus a lack. Huh.
And it's the responsibility of all of us to
Of
fill our
yes,
hearts.
yes.
Not first, but to fill our hearts so
I
that,
think first. I
yes,
think first
we
it
don't
is
put that
responsibility.
responsibility
Yes,
on others.
yes. I think it expands it to any relationship. So
Yes.
when do we engage in the relationship? If we engage, it's true for romantic relationship and friendships. If we engage in the relationship to fill some void in ourselves, then we would need certain things from the relationship. If we just develop it, as you well said, as an addition, as a gift, relationship as a gift, without the need for this relationship to play a certain role or feel a certain void, it's a completely different energy.
Yes.
Mhm. So let's talk a little bit more specifically. As a daughter, what can you do differently or try to do differently? And as a mother, what I will say what I can do differently, and then we'll um, respond to each other's ideas or hopes.
Differently in what perspective? Like in
Both
how,
inside, how can we process it differently internally, and on the behavioral level, how can we behave differently,
I
being aware of these things that we just talked about, that not using relationship to compensate for something, for some lack, but as a gift. And
Mhm.
also being aware that giving this fluidity to relationship, really see a person with new eyes each time we see him or her, and relate accordingly. If we use these fundamental principles and apply them to our specific relationship, your specific relationship with your mom and my specific relationship with Katie, uh, what can we do differently behaviorally and psychologically?
Two words come to mind: boundaries and communication. Of being
Beautiful.
able to, I'm in this interesting moment of my life where I've been single for many years. And so time around family has just been me, and my brother's married. And um, I've been this same person for many years in front of my
Mhm.
family. And now I have a relationship that I'm not single, and not that I'm a different person, but it is a different dynamic to my
Mhm.
family. And it's an adjustment, and it's for everyone, for my family, for me. And I think boundaries are important, especially in a relationship with Chris, but also my family. Of like, now it's not just about me, it's about us. And
Mhm.
someone in my life is really important to me. And boundaries are important. So I think being able to kind of set those of what is important and what you need out of family, but then also being able to communicate it, because I think we learn communication styles from our family most growing up. That's probably the biggest uh, style that we learn because we're around it the most. And so being able to adapt and adjust and being able to communicate what I need and what's important to me with love and compassion um, is is important. I can't expect people to read my mind, especially my family, and I think I do that a lot.
I think we all do that a lot. I think it's when you were talking about communication styles, unfortunately, in many families, communication is not very healthy. And what affects communication, I believe, expectations that certain people should respond or react in a certain way. Most time we react, which means we respond the same way over and over to the same stimulus, and learning new communication styles. And one of the things that comes to mind in my experience with my daughter, but also with my husband, with other people, when they first feel the reaction,
Mhm,
I know it's old autopilot.
mhm.
And being able to say, no, let's try it again. And I've tried it several times and it worked most of the time, with a few exceptions when we were both very like emotionally charged. It works. Say, let's start over.
Mhm,
Like, for example, you have a flare, right? One person acts, another reacts, and another reacts. Okay, let's try it over.
mhm.
And when both people are at least willing, because one person may turn around and say, no, forget about it. It's possible, but at least try.
I
And
love
ev-
that. I love
Mhm.
that.
Yeah, yeah.
And I
It-
think it's so powerful in families and with mother daughter relationships because we have our whole lifetime of experiences in it being likely one way of tension and
mhm.
fighting. This is how we fight. This is how there is tension in our relationship, and being able to just call a timeout and say let's start over, try again, or try something new is amazing.
And another thing is that is important that you cannot expect another person to do it because you have no control
Mhm.
over other person's actions or reactions. So the only person who can actually do it and who can take a risk to do it, because it does mean take a risk, take courage, because when you are in the middle of anger or frustration, it's very hard to do. But nevertheless, each time I tried, with probably a few exceptions, I cannot think of exceptions right now, but I can think of a few situations when it did work. I wouldn't expect my daughter or my husband to say, okay, let's start over.
Mhm.
But I can always, they can do it sometimes, but I cannot expect it, right? But if I know that it's likely to work, each of us can say, okay, it didn't work, obviously, the way we interacted a minute ago or 5 minutes ago. Let's start over. So, inviting, having enough courage and willingness and persistence to say, no, it's not. It's a poor communication. We are victims of our emotions. Our emotions takes the best of us right now, particularly the emotions of irritation and frustration and anger and disappointment. Let's start
And our
over.
pattern that we have developed.
Exactly, exactly, exactly. So these things, let's start over, will help us break these old patterns and actually not even break the old ones, because it's very difficult to break the pattern. It's starting developing new ones and then exercising them. We are creatures of habits. So exercising our new habit, a healthier one, and putting all of our energy into exercising this new one, this old one will die in its all. We don't even have to use our energy trying to kill the old habit. Mm-mm. Just developing new ones again and again and again.
Yes. So, what about you and behavioral or psychological? What could you do different, or what are you aware?
So, behaviorally, I think I already said one of these
Mhm.
tools is just saying, this communication didn't work. Let's start over. Sometimes you can do it right away. Probably it's the most effective to do right away. Sometimes it's impossible because both people are so charged that they need to take some time off and then come back to this issue. Um, at times, and this is a new discovery for me, you just need to let it go.
Mm.
So the flare came, the flare left, not necessarily to philosophize or discuss every single conflict. Sometimes we just need to let it go, especially if it's a minor thing. Um, and another thing psychologically, and this is a biggie, I believe, as a mother, trusting that your daughter knows her way. It may be not my way. Trusting your daughter's ability to, even if she encounters some barriers or does something not the way you want it to be done, trusting that eventually she will discover her way. And it's such a big change. It has been for me. I'm still working on it. Believe me, I still have to remind myself I have to trust, and I choose to trust, not have to trust. I choose to trust that my daughter is will find her way. This is one part. And the second part is also with humility saying, I may not know what's the best for my daughter.
Mm.
And this part is also very difficult. It's true, and on the intellectual level I understand it, but on the level of autopilot I keep thinking that I know what's better for her, and then I have to catch myself 1050th time and say no, with this humility and kindness and love. I must admit I may not know what's the best for my daughter.
Mhm. Yeah, I love that. And just listening to you and reflecting of being your daughter's age of I don't know, the hardships and the crap that I have gotten myself into in life that my mom probably has wanted to protect me or steer me in the wrong direction or in the right direction and thought I was headed for a cliff, like have led me to where I am today. Like I
Yes.
needed them in my life. So protecting your daughter from hardship or from the wrong or right decisions that you may think may be doing more of a disservice than a service for her because she needs to we all need to scrape our knees and figure life out ourselves.
Please say it again and again and again, because I really would like to, whoever is listening, mothers and daughters out there, hearing this,
Mm-hmm.
so that your daughters, whatever you believe misdeeds or mistakes or wrong turns made her who she is right now, and her choices today will continue to make her what she will be or shape her to what she will be tomorrow. So, but you said it so beautifully. Could you please say it again as a statement to the mothers or request to mothers all out there in your own words?
Mothers, let your daughters scrape their knees because they need to. And sometimes going down what you may think is the wrong path is their path that they need to walk.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I will say I remember I I was living in Chicago and got involved in a very terrible relationship that I didn't let my mom know of for a very long time until it was over. And I remember I was not living in Colorado and I was home for Christmas or some break, and I was super nervous to tell her, and I told her, and she just sat there and like held me and like was so graceful and so loving to a situation that she could have judged so incredibly terrible. um and I think that's when I, at the beginning of the conversation, the times and the moments where I feel so connected to my mom is when there isn't this layer of you shouldn't have done that, I'm mad at you, and but just like, yeah, that sucks, I'm here for you.
This is another thing that is so beautifully said, and something that I discovered the hard way is my daughter said this so many times. She said, Mom, could you please just listen?
Yes.
and tell me that everything will be okay and you are there for me no matter what. And this is what I wanted to say, but this is not what I was actually saying, because what I was saying was, oh, what if you did this or did that? And of course, it didn't lead anywhere. And it, as we already discussed, the root of it is the desire to protect your daughter, is the desire to not her, prevent her from falling flat on her face over and over. But another thing that was a discovery for me, that as mothers, we try to protect our daughters not to fall on their face. But if we ask ourselves, how many times, even right now, we fall flat on our face, it's amazing. I think it's just our human nature. We only learn from our own processes and our own choices. I wouldn't even call them mistakes. We cannot, as human beings, we cannot learn experientially from other people's experiences. We can only learn from others. And this is another very good example of identification. We would like to prevent our daughters from falling on their face, but actually we are protecting ourselves from falling flat on our faces. And just being aware that you will continue doing it as long as you live, regardless of age, and allowing yourself to do it, then probably there will be not that pressure of projecting it out onto the daughters and preventing them from falling down on their faces.
It's almost like, I can't speak for mothers because I'm not one, but it's almost like when you become a mother, you forget the experience of being a daughter.
Mhm. Mhm. Exactly.
Like you wanted freedom and to fall on
Yes.
your face when you were a daughter, or when
In
you
my
are.
experience, when I became a mother, I forgot about almost everything. It's really, for me, was a life-changing experience. And since I have just one child, it's I don't have the privilege of knowing that then when you have more than two or more, it's different. Probably I don't have an experience, so I cannot talk about this. Most people say these were completely different experiences with every child. um, but what I can say that even in terms of I spent a lot of time in the hospital because I had complications before giving birth and after giving birth. And the nurses and doctors around there just said, oh my God, when she gave birth, she became a completely different person, such a nice woman, so kind and so like, be turned into this lioness who is constantly like roaring toward all the personnel. So it was probably pretty vivid from the very first moment.
You turned from this nice soft woman to a lioness when you had Katie. Yeah.
Mhm. Because it's immediately protection
Uh-huh.
that what's born with a child in a mother, in my experiences, when I talk with my clients, in many mothers' experiences, is this lioness that the first role, the first idea, the first task is to protect your
Mm.
cub, and everything else becomes so secondary. And this is true for the first, like, I don't know, probably until the child lives in at home. And also it needs to change, as you beautifully said, needs to fluctuate. Protecting a 2-year-old, it's different from protecting a 5-year-old, and it's different from protecting an 18-year-old.
And
But
it's different than protecting a 37-year-old.
I don't need even to say anything about that. Yes, this is true, but this is what we forget. And we go on this autopilot of this lioness that protects her cub and forgets that this cub has all the freedoms in the world, and that this cub is not a cub anymore, but a woman with her own desires, with her own intelligence, with her own abilities, with her own completely different perspective on the world, which is another thing that we already discussed before. But for the mothers, if I had a message for mothers, I would say, mothers, please, please remember that your daughter's inner world is a completely different perspective of the world. It's not your inner world. And that her journey is a completely different journey from your own. And let her live her life and unfold in the ways she's choosing to unfold, and her life is leading her to unfold.
So beautiful. What would you say to daughters?
I would say to daughters that please learn to speak your truth,
Mm.
regardless of what your mothers say or not say or do not do. Um, please, please express yourself. Have courage to express yourself, regardless of what says who of other people's perspectives on you, including your mother's. Don't live your life trying to impress your mother or
What if
father.
you think it's going to hurt you?
Say it again, please.
What if we think it's going to hurt you?
You will be hurt in life, and I won't be able to protect. It's my message to my daughter. You will be hurt, and you have been hurt in life. And I just right now, with humility, accept the fact that I cannot protect you from life. It's very difficult to admit, but it's truth. It's my truth. It's, I believe this is the fundamental truth of life, that we cannot protect our children from all the hardships of the world. And so that is why take risks and explore your life. Don't live your life for me, live your life for yourself. And each time I'm trying to lead you to lead your life the way I want, please let me know, because
So
I will continue doing this, because this is autopilot that is so hard to harness. So what I'm trying to do, and what I hope other mothers will at least consider, is developing this new set of skills and new set of behaviors and new set of healthier habits. But the old habits will continue to flare here and there. I don't want to pretend that I will wake up one day and stop wanting to protect my daughter and everything that comes with it.
Mhm.
So that is why one of the part of my message to the daughters is, please tell me when I am again and again trying to let you live my life and not yours, or try to protect you, or try to tell you what to, not try, am telling you what to do. Stop me and say, Mom, hopefully calmly if you can, you are again wanting me to live your life, or you're again telling me what to do.
I think it's so beautiful. So thank you for that advice. Um, in listening to you, I also think of like, I want to know what my mom needs and wants. That it's not my job to make her happy or keep her happy, or, but I do want to play a role in my mom's life as an adult woman. And I think my assumption is when you become a mom, you sacrifice a lot of your own needs, and you make a lot of sacrifices in your life. And the program is there even when your kids leave the house. And I don't want my mom to make sacrifice. I want my mom to live this beautiful life that she's worked so hard to create, and she has so much freedom, and not have the sacrifices of kids, or of life.
Well, it's so well said, and I'm so glad that you brought it up, the idea of sacrifice. And the same with protection. When the kids are little, mothers do need to make sacrifices. It's just the nature of life, because you have to make time for your children. You have to make something that you would rather do, you cannot do because you have to attend to your children. But it can. It ends at certain age. But our autopilot continues, and we continue to make sacrifices. But the problem is, and this is something that I would like to pinpoint, is when children are little, the mothers are making sacrifices unconditionally.
Mhm.
And the more the children grow, the more difficult it is for the mothers to make sacrifices unconditionally. So they continue making the sacrifices, but then unconsciously, they want their children to pay them back. And this is why people say, and this is absolutely true, absolutely. This is true. At least this is true for myself. I don't know what's absolutely true. But it's true that why it's easier to love little babies and animals,
Because they can't give
because
it back.
exactly, because we don't need anything back. We do sacrifices for them, but we don't expect anything in return. But why it's harder to love older children and adult children, because we continue making sacrifices for them and then unconsciously waiting for them to pay us back. They may or may not. Very often they don't. And then it's a huge energy difference between me still doing a lot for my child and her not returning back. And then it's a lot of conflict. And when there is a lack of balance of energy, obviously the conflict will uh, erupt sooner or later. So what you just said, Stacy, it's just so fundamental. And I think this is part of your message for the moms,
Mhm.
is that please don't do sacrifices. Live your life.
Yeah.
And it's a beautiful message.
Yeah.
No sacrifices are needed anymore. And
Mhm.
if I need your help or advice, I'll come and ask for it.
Yes. And then in that moment, you probably would be more than happy to sacrifice because there's a need to fill and I'm asking for it.
Yeah. And what is your message for the daughters?
Hmm. What first comes to mind is like, uh, I don't know. I really like this idea of meeting your mom for the first time in every moment and in every situation of um I'd imagine it's hard to be a mom and there's a lot of grace and compassion and um that we need to meet our moms with. Um and I would also say learn to communicate, learn to speak your truth and what you need and being able to express it. Learn what it is and then learn how to express it to your mom. Because I
Beautifully
think
said.
the idea of it is probably scarier than actually doing it. And the receiving end of being a mom probably would appreciate it.
Well, uh, the idea of it, I probably disagree with you in terms of the idea. The idea is very noble of meeting people. Actually, this is true for both mothers and daughters and all people, regardless of their roles, is just meeting others as if we met them for the first time.
Mhm.
Doing it is much harder.
No, I didn't
Mm.
mean that. I meant
What
the
did you mean?
idea of speaking your truth and being
Oh,
to
I
communicate
see. I
what
see.
you
Then yeah, then yes, the idea of it is yes, yes. Here I'm completely agree with you. I just you see, I'm glad I clarified because I missed your point. And yes, but going back to first speaking your truth, but also really preparing yourself ahead of time
Mhm.
with the thought, okay, I will do my best. I will try again and again to see my mom with new eyes,
Mhm.
to see my mom and relate to her as if all of our history didn't exist. And maybe I'll discover something else. Maybe with the interest. You also said it earlier today. You said with sincere interest,
Mhm.
who she is as a person.
Mhm.
And I actually right now think about my own mother, and she lives in Ukraine, and for the past almost 30 years we've lived in different continents and have seen each other. We try to see each other every year, but at times we wouldn't see. In this year during pandemic, I didn't see my mom this summer and my dad. And uh, when I realized, probably about 20 years ago, I started working on my attitude toward my parents and forgiving them for something that I didn't like, and appreciating. I've always appreciated my parents. So this was not difficult. And all of my actually holding grudges were in my unconsciousness. It took me some work to bring them into my conscious mind. And then one by one, trying to let them go, let them go. And, but what I discovered recently is that I started asking my mom questions.
Mhm.
Right, we communicate on Skype several times a week, and it's just a recent discovery. questions that I didn't ask. And I sometimes think why I didn't ask this like 10 years ago, 5 years ago. And she answers, and I discover new assets of my mom. And she's 80, will be 85 next year. So she's 84. And I'm discovering something that I haven't known about her. It's beautiful.
Mhm. To the point of patterns and communication patterns, we just expect our relationships, especially in family, just to be how they always are and talk about what
Mm-hmm.
we always talk about, and taking a risk and having courage to shift those conversations and make them about something different is really beautiful.
Yes, yes. So let's try to sum up
Mhm.
and kind of make a few bullet points to ourselves, for ourselves, and those who are listening. Um, how can we make our relationships with our mothers and daughters more kind, and communication more efficient, and relationship much deeper and richer and better than it is right now
In adult relationships.
in adult relationships? Yes. So the first thing that comes to my mind in light of what we just talked about is having being aware of your preconceived ideas and predicaments of what you expect this person to say or do, and say, you sit here
Mhm.
and I'm opening my heart and my mind to a person who I don't know. So approaching them with this um, novice mind, or the mind of the person who doesn't know.
Yeah. I think in terms of communication, um, I think on both mothers and daughters' ends of um, being able to break communication patterns that
Mhm.
have existed your whole life or during your whole relationship, and be courageous enough to ask new questions or be interested, or speak your truth and say what's important to you and what you need, because um, maybe your mom doesn't know what you need and doesn't know how to have an adult relationship with you. And so being courageous enough to shift the conversation and communicate on your terms.
Yes. And to add a little bit to this, even if it doesn't work the first time, maybe having enough courage to say, okay, let's start over
Mhm.
and have this conversation again. So courage is a big thing here, and also um, interest, sincere interest, from what I said, from what I heard. So the next thing that I believe is important for mothers in particular, but also for daughters, I think many of them overlap, is to say to yourself that I don't know what is the best for my daughter, because I do not know her inner world. I may know some of the elements, I may know some of her interests and some of her habits, but I don't know her inner world. And it takes humility and, again, courage to say this, that I don't know what's the best for my daughter.
Mhm.
And I trust, comes the next to that, I trust that she will discover it herself.
Yes. And to mothers, let your daughters scrape their knees and hit walls and possibly run off a cliff, because it is their path. It is our path. It's all of our paths. Just as you needed to scrape your knees and hit a wall, sometimes that is the biggest gift in our lives.
Yes. And remembering that you have to be a lioness protecting her cub only to a certain age.
Mm.
And then you can meet your daughter as another lioness, whether she has children or not yet, but as an adult who is capable of making her own decisions, and um, has the right to make her own decisions, including scraping her knees or jumping off the cliff, and respecting this right. It takes courage and humility and kindness. And again, it's easier said than done, because when we're in the midst of the conflict, when everything is hot, all the emotions are just all over the place. The moment you just remember it, start acting on it.
Yeah.
Because in the midst of this hot emotional exchange, we forget. We forget all these intellectual concepts. And in order for them to be your new habit, healthier habit, obviously, as creatures of habit, we need to develop them. So starting over again and again and again.
Yes. And I think one of the last ones is sacrifices. And in adult
Mhm.
relationships, sacrifices mean something different. And for mothers to fill their own cup, because this is the time in an adult relationship that you can fill your own cup, and um, not make sacrifices that are not asked, or yeah, can't be reciprocated, or have this high bar of reciprocation that will never be met.
Yes. Yes, and for daughters, many daughters told me, I feel so guilty that I cannot reach up to my mother's expectations, or I feel so guilty that I cannot return all the sacrifices she made for me, or that I cannot return the favor. Um, just remember that it's just the nature of, you don't have to return. Just be aware of this guilt. Again, put it on the passenger seat and say, well, I don't need it. We will not speak the language of sacrifices. I don't need to make my own sacrifices in order to compensate for my mother's sacrifices that she did for me. What I need is just be open in the relationship and love. Really, what is love in the mother's daughter's relationship? I think just sitting next to each other,
Mhm.
sometimes just holding each other and saying, it's all going to be good,
Mhm.
with no words of uh, lecturing or wise words of advice exactly, but just sitting there in each other's presence and allowing each other to be with,
Beautiful.
with open heart,
Mhm.
sometimes aching heart, but still mm, being in each other's presence as much as possible without any strings attached.
Mhm. I've loved this conversation.
Me too.
Yeah.
Now we just need to continue to develop our relationships with this awareness, and also again allowing ourselves and our daughters to make mistakes, and regardless of them, starting over and over and over every day.
And treating it as like this plant that grows, and you have to have water, and you have
Ah,
to trim
beautiful.
it, or you have to put it in the sun or the shade, or it's this ever evolving, living, breathing thing that needs
Organism,
or
every relationship is an organism in itself, and it's beautifully said. I
yeah.
like this metaphor with the plant that needs different things during the different times, but what it does need always is light and water. And light, it means not hot, like sometimes it's, we didn't talk about it today, about smothering, about suffocating love of the mother, that it's very difficult for the daughter to tolerate, or to even accept. So, but warm light of acceptance and allowing, and also water, which means continuously giving energy to this relationship, giving your presence when you can, but not forced presence,
Right.
sincere presence. Yeah.
Thank you for all of your wisdom. Thank
Thank you for all of your wisdom. I think the fact that we are playing so different roles, and we're able to approach this discussion from completely different role, not completely, because I'm also a mother and a daughter, but from the perspective of a young adult who is a daughter, and an older adult who is a mother.
you.
It's, I think, so beneficial to hear it from both perspectives.
I agree. And not
Thank you.
not related, but a different perspective that is more neutral in our lives. It
Yes.
helps us look at our own relationships.
So when we say neutral, I would like just to at least express how I feel what neutral is. It's non-judgmental, first and foremost. Neutral, it which means doesn't say it's right or wrong.
Mhm.
It's just the way it is. This is what neutral for me.
Yes.
What is it for you?
Um, yeah, there's not the baggage. There's not
Mm-hmm.
the baggage that we bring to familial relationships. And yeah, I think I agree with you. There's not a right.
So yeah, I think it's a great element that you added. No, without it's almost fresh relationship, without the baggage, without preconceived ideas, and with equanimity, with like not really knowing ahead of time what's right, what's wrong, but just allowing it to unfold um, as it unfolds, affected by a myriad of factors, most of which we're not aware.
Yes.
Yeah,
I love you, Marina.
I love you too.
Thank you
Thank
for
you for this conversation. I really enjoyed it.
Yes, me too. Until next week.